Welcome to episode number 230, where I'm speaking with Acharya Shunya about her new book, Roar Like a Goddess, Every Woman's Guide to Becoming Unapologetically Powerful, Prosperous, and Peaceful. We talk about the Vedic Goddess Shakti and her chief goddess manifestations, and this conversation is full of Vedic wisdom on empowered womanhood. So please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Acharya Shunya, who is the first female lineage holder of her distinguished Vedic tradition. She is an internationally renowned scholar, teacher, author, speaker, and scholar of nondual wisdom Advaita from India, and a classically trained master of Yoga and Ayurveda. She is the founder of the Awakened Self Foundation and the nonprofit Vedic Global Inc. platforms, headquartered in Northern California, that empower, educate, and inspire a global community of students through online courses, workshops, and retreats. These conversations are furthered by Shunya's top-rated podcast, Shadow to Self. An award-winning author of international repute, Shunya's most recent book, Roar Like a Goddess, Every Woman's Guide to Becoming Unapologetically Powerful, Prosperous, and Peaceful, will be published by Sounds True in July 2022. Acharya Shunya, it's such a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm also excited to be talking to you, Colette. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's true pleasure and honor. And I was very fortunate to get a sneak peek of your new book, and I love it. It's so empowering and packed with wonderful wisdom that I think all us women need to hear. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with the definition of goddess, please. And what is the goddess power?
We can view the goddess as an entity that is beyond the mundane sphere of our existence, something angelic, maybe something with the wings and a cosmic tiara. But really the goddess, the way it is defined in ancient Vedic Hindu texts, is an aspect of the highest consciousness that dwells within us too. It dwells within us as a spark of truth and beauty and courage and soul within us. And at a universal level, the goddess represents that divine consciousness. So it's really truth. This is not just an imagination, because this perfection exists. And lo and behold, we can exist. We can connect or access this goddess dimension not only through prayer and devotion and meditation, but also by looking within and emulating her stories from the Hindu mythology and other mythology around the world, and walking that walk of the goddess.
And you talked about the goddess power. Can you give us some examples of what is that goddess power? You talked about how it's this our highest consciousness.
As humans, we so often think that our power is limited somehow. And when we are running low on it, we have to beg for power, borrow power, seduce or manipulate for power. And that's so not true, because power is divinely sourced from within. When it's goddess power, it doesn't need to be created or morphed unnaturally. It's self-existing. And instead of self-effacing, it's self-celebrating. Instead of being externally validated that, yep, you got power, it is self-validating. It just validates you from within. And it's not something that we lose on putting into practice, or, it's not in limited supply, so to say. It's infinite, and it grows every time we act powerfully. And because of this power, we need not ever be fearful that we're ever going to be too much because of it, and we better be under the radar. We can really be bold like a goddess. We can feel equal. We can be vulnerable. We never need to be defensive. And we can share this power. No need to hoard it. And we can be creative rather than be copycats around the world, because it's truly unique. It is not something that's that it's unique to each goddess. It's unique to each heart. And finally, it helps us roar rather than meow for acceptance. It roars with self-acceptance, self-approval, self-love.
I love that. There's an infinite supply of this goddess power within us. We just need to acknowledge and nourish it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, talking about roaring, why is now the time for us women to roar like a goddess?
Perhaps it's always been time, but now more than ever, because humanity as a species has achieved much progress. But one place where regression is clear, or the inability to move forward is clear, is the willingness of a dominant gender to share this planet with the feminine and other genders. It almost feels humorous and ridiculous, but it's also heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it feels like we are at the precipice of either a change, or we are going to really go down the slippery slope. This can't work anymore. Power has to be shared, and power has to be reclaimed by each woman from within. And if you're someone with a gender that is not mainstream, that has been made into a question mark, whereas nature has not made you a question mark. It's an ignorance created question mark. Then you have to become your own answer. You have to become your own solution. You have to verify your own being, because you exist with pride. That's why now, when else but now, to do this work.
Absolutely. There's such a lack of balance between the masculine and feminine at the moment, which I think is why we're partially in the position in the world we are now, because each of those energies of masculine and feminine bring its own qualities for the whole. And so we're way too much one-sided right now.
Yeah. The oppression of women is multi-layered, and we have to, and it's not just in feudal countries or backward countries. It's everywhere. We've seen it now. Yeah. That's why we needed a Me Too movement.
Absolutely.
So it's time for regaining unapologetic power as a goddess.
And we've just been conditioned for so many centuries. So, like I was saying to you before we started recording, with this book, we need these reminders all the time to know our self-worth, to know our inner power, and to step up. And we each have a valuable role to play in our communities. And so we need to feel that empowerment to step forward and do the work that we came here to do.
We need to carry on this conversation. I agree. We can't ever get sidetracked.
Yeah.
And we definitely can become content with leading out our womanly roles and ticking all the boxes and believing that it's all going to be okay. We have to dynamically, proactively, and with effort, change the narrative.
Yes. Yeah. I know in my own life, I definitely need these reminders because I find myself sinking back into old rhythms or old patterns, like I'm in a fog. And then all of a sudden it's like, what am I doing? And that's why it's great to get these reminders. And you talked in the book about how Vedic wisdom really talked about empowered womanhood.
So the Vedic wisdom is a wisdom that predates all religions from the land of India. It comes even before the Hindu religion, which is the oldest, and Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism. So many religions were born in India, but before the religions came about, there was this conscious way of living. And that is known as the Vedic way of living, because the Veda itself comes from the root vid, the VID, which means to know, to be aware, to be expansive. And naturally, if you want to really embrace an aware way of life, then you're not going to separate divinity between masculine and feminine. They even conceived of a masculine and feminine blend of divinity. And they talk about Ardhanarishvara, a kind of a goddess who is half masculine, half feminine. And this Veda proclaimed equal opportunity for men and women in education, profession, marriage, and spiritual choices. They call for equality in everything, from leadership to inheritance. And there was no social prohibitions on women's secular and spiritual advancement. And that's why women from those thousands of years ago were invited to become homemakers or leaders of the assembly or war. I have read verses about lead the army, O great woman, to becoming full-time spiritual teachers like myself, who were called Brahmavadinis or Rishikas. So they had so many epithets to call a woman, and each one of them was so looking up to who they are. For example, she was called Aditi because she's never dependent, in the sense that she's boundless, limitless in her consciousness. She was called Agnya, for she is not to be hurt and should be treated with utmost respect. She's called Chandra because she's luminous like the moon. She's called Devi since she's a goddess herself. She's called Havya because she's worthy of invocation. She's called Ida, for she is venerable like the earth. She's called Jyota because she's the brilliant one. And finally, amongst the many epithets that I've shared in my book, she's called Kamya because she's lovable, beautiful, and desirable as she is.
Beautiful.
So this divine feminine tradition, this tradition that equally venerates the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and the divine mixed gender, and the divine formulas, is my tradition. My family, for the last 2,000 years in the northern India, in and around the holy city of Ayodhya, has been sharing this venerable tradition, which includes texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. And we see this upholding of the right spirit towards women. But the present India that I was born in the 1960s, held up all this stuff like a memory, like a religious story, but in the hard day-to-day reality, there was patriarchy, there was sexism, there was pretty regressive views towards women. Not in my family per se, but all around me. And so to resolve that, I had to go back to what was the original invitation by the men and women, the sages of my country and my culture. And a great Vedic scripture says the ultimate reality is not female, male, or mixed gender. Whatever form, whatever gender, this formless great reality assumes, it becomes identified with that, which means divinity cannot be boxed, cannot be limited. We are all divine beings, and live with that truth. And that's how gradually I felt like the teachings of the Vedic culture was relevant for the world and was relevant for the brothers and sisters of my nation to go forward.
Yeah, and I love that in your book you made a point of saying this wisdom is not just for women, but for like you kept that unlimited welcome for everyone, for those who identify as women, and you made a point of that in your book, and I really appreciate that.
Yes, why not? Because when patriarchy is the dominant belief, then it's not only women who have to play specific roles and be limited by them, but men too. They are told that men don't cry.
Right.
Men don't feel, men don't ask for help. In a patriarchal culture, men are left out there to dry and become either really hard and unfeeling versions of themselves, or hide their femininity and sexuality in the closet many times.
Yeah.
We need to be free of these kind of oppressive beliefs so that we can just all be ourselves and become channels to flow the divine feminine through us, and also uphold the divine masculine. Let there not be a battle of genders at the sublime level or the mundane level, please.
Absolutely.
Can we do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree and love that it's just whatever you identify as, bring your inner truth out into the world, because we need you as you are, with that divine essence coming from you, to play the part in the whole consciousness, which is lovely. In your book also, you talk about the Supreme Vedic Goddess Shakti, and then you have a chapter on each of her chief goddesses, manifestations of Goddess Durga, Goddess Lakshmi, and Goddess Saraswati. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about each of the goddesses, and starting with Goddess Shakti, please.
Shakti literally represents power, and the power of every kind, the kind I was mentioning. And Shakti is the concept of a non-dual version of the divine feminine who can be or become any goddesses. And there are thousands of goddesses explained in the Vedic literature and the Vedic oral tradition. And chief amongst them are Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. And in fact, it is said that it is Shakti who resides within each one of us. And you and I and all our listeners are also, we are incantations of Shakti. We are her mini avatars. Colette is a mini avatar of Shakti, and Acharya Shunya is a mini avatar. And every time the world had us in a corner, I'm sure you will confirm that, Colette, something within us said, enough. I'm not taking that.
Yeah.
I'm coming back. And every time a woman came back, despite cultural and gender or sexual and other oppression, despite rape or shaming or blaming or minimizing or ignoring, it was Shakti who roared through them.
Yeah.
And her chief avatars who we can emulate and whose archetype I've gone into and whose teachings I have shared in my book are Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. Durga represents courage, boldness, and the ability to channel rage. That's right. For centuries, we women have been told that we are peacekeepers and we are sweethearts, and we don't channel rage. And in fact, women who do channel rage are considered hags and witches and bitches. But Durga represents roaring with rage because she doesn't put up with nonsense and not, which is known as adharma or lack of dharma. And it's interesting that in her stories, she is sexually objectified, she is minimized, she is, attempted to be harmed by a group of asuras or ignorant, demonic, dark people on the planet. But she represents being bold, fearless, shameless, the heroine. And she doesn't scuttle away or hide herself or cover herself some more or be sweet and kind and forgiving and nice and everything made of sweetness and candy. And instead she roars and she says, yes, I'm beautiful. Yes, I'm sexual. Yes, I'm gorgeous. But I was not put on this planet to please you. I was put on this planet to kill you. And so, of course, I'm not teaching modern day goddesses to kill other people who don't support them, but her killing is really metaphorical for putting an end to those obstacles. Right. Because those half human, half grotesque entities, which are called asuras, who come in her face, are really representative of our own inner and outer obstacles. But she didn't lose her power. She gained more power from facing them. And so in my book, she teaches many, many lessons on, even delineating or discerning when is anger appropriate. So I talk about 3 kinds of rages. The unconscious rage, which we all, men and women, want to step away from. But there is the conscious rage. And then there is even the superconscious rage, the goddess-like rage, which is for the benefit of all beings. And those must be channeled at the due time. And every time we channel it, we do the whole world a favor. Durga talks about what to do if you're accosted sexually. She talks to us about unconditional self-respect, and I share her stories of when she stood up for herself. How to establish boundaries. And it's interesting that Durga never really married. She's like a single goddess. She doesn't really fit the stereotype of a domestic goddess like Lakshmi. So she defies stereotypes, and she helps us women stop bothering if we've missed that, if we've crossed 30 or 40 or 50 and we're still without a partner. She really shows us how you can be complete as you are. I love this goddess, and I have her deity facing me right now in my own home study and plus altar right here in my home where I'm speaking from. Then there is Goddess Lakshmi, and she's the most beautiful goddess. She represents Mother Earth. She represents Mother Nature. She lives in every flower, every petal, every blade of grass, every tree, every cloud, every raindrop. And she represents abundance in our heart. And in 16 ways, she represents abundance, which includes money, which includes children, which includes friends, which includes food, which includes clothing and jewelry. So the different ways, emotionally, materially, socially, we can feel abundant. It is said to be her blessing alone. But then I have a chapter which says the greatest wealth comes from valuing yourself. And we have, lo and behold, a story where she was not treated with value by people she lived with. But what Lakshmi demonstrated was not putting up with it, but she got up and left. And when she left, those very people were desolate because when she walked away, spring left, flowers left, health left, nature left. And so they were bereft. And then she comes back only much later on being, and she, on her self-respect being restored. So I talk about how Lakshmi's greatest teaching is don't allow yourself to be tossed away. Value yourself like Lakshmi did. And this is how she is able to not only be abundant within, but then to share this abundance in each one of us. And Colette, stories are not told like this about Lakshmi. The average stories are pray to her and, your wallet will fill up. Pray to her if you need a baby. Pray to her. And we're just pleading and entreating. But I connected her story, her archetype of why the hell did she walk away? And then when she returned as a world goddess. And she married Vishnu, the supreme masculine, and became the supreme feminine. So she's shown changing partners. She's shown changing her location. She's shown making new choices. And I think that's the path to wealth and well-being, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think Lakshmi is a great role model for us.
Yeah, not portraying yourself and your values.
Yeah. And sometimes contentment is connected with the goddess. Like if you're content, you're abundant. And I like that. And it's very popular in the world to talk about contentment plus abundance. But then I also connected with discontentment and abundance. Like there are times we have to become discontent with the way our partner is treating us, or the way our boss is treating us, right? Or the way our girlfriend is gossiping about us, because it's only then that we make change and we assert new boundaries. And so I talk about how Lakshmi is not only the goddess of contentment, but dharmic discontentment too. And how Lakshmi is not only the teacher of generosity, but she's also a teacher of how to move the generosity towards yourself. And it was high time that this mythology was looked at with fine lenses. So instead of dogmatic, be kind, be generous, be content, be peaceful, be beatific, smile like a goddess. It is time to really look at the goddess at a 360-degree lens and just see the totality of her. And finally, there is Saraswati. And in her mythology, she deals with a relationship with her spouse in mythology land, which is somewhat estranged. But we also find that Saraswati does not allow that estrangement of her partnership with her partner to wear her out. And she goes about the world imparting awakening to the ready souls. So she says, wake up, face your trauma. You're not just what didn't work for you, but you are a goddess. And so Saraswati teaches us how not to harbor irrational feminine guilt of I didn't make it, or there's something not right with me because my relationship is not working. She thrived at a professional level. She thrived at a world level. She found so much more to herself, and she became the beneficiary of lasting inner peace from within. And that is why she's the giver of lasting inner peace to her worshippers and emulators. And I love this goddess. And I love how she represents to us that we can be a goddess even if there are some fractured areas in our life, and that you can play your own music, because she's shown playing her lute, or which is known as veena in our language, and she's playing her lute, and which represents that your inner music starts coming out of you when you stop listening to all the noises, the would've, should've, could've's, and you wake up within. Yeah. And then music begins to flow. So these are the three goddesses that I've talked about in my book.
I'm going to jump in here for a moment, because if you're inspired by Acharya Shunya's words, and in particular about awakening that inner music within you, awakening that inner goddess and connecting to your true nature, and if you're looking for support on this journey, of course, checking out Acharya Shunya's new book, Roar Like a Goddess, is a great source of inspiration. But if you're also looking for more tailored support, I offer that in my online consultations, where we will look at your birth constitution, see if you have any current imbalances, and help you align holistically so that you have that clarity and that awareness to connect to your inner truth. That's the objective with Ayurveda. It really is a journey to self-realization. And that begins with balancing your doshas and getting your health in such a place that you're not draining energy anywhere, and that you can truly have that connection to your inner truth, and learning how to eat, live, work out, build up self-care practices so that you can remain in a state of balance, prevent any disease physically or mentally, so that you can thrive and you can bring out that inner goddess. If you're interested in some tailored support, just click on the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. I also wanted to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Kerala Ayurveda Academy. Do you wish to lead a more holistic life and guide others to do the same? Kerala Ayurveda Academy welcomes you to align with nature's rhythms and build a foundation in traditional Vedic science. Spring certification program starts soon for all levels of learning, and you can study online or in person. To learn more, visit keralaayurveda.us/courses. You'll also find that link in the show notes. Okay, let's go back to my conversation with Acharya Shunya. And there are such valuable lessons, like you said, those fractured areas in our life that Goddess Saraswati talked about, or the discontentment and being uncomfortable, is what, like you said, leads to the new boundaries, to change, leads to action. And we need to be uncomfortable or made uncomfortable or have these fractures in our life in order for us to come out of that fog and see clearly, and then put up those boundaries and make the steps towards being in connection with our true self.
Indeed.
You have a specific purpose in Roar Like a Goddess. And you said in the book, you want to help us break free from patriarchal conditioning and letting go of internalized misogyny. So can you talk more on this, please, and how you encourage us to awaken our inner goddess powers?
I noticed that I felt that the goddess archetypal Dharma teachings that I'm providing are relevant in all ages, but they're especially relevant because there is a climate of patriarchy everywhere that favors men over women, and other gendered beings and folks are deeply marginalized and abused and hurt. And part of that is not just ignorant men and women coming at us because they want to uphold masculine gender, masculine gods, masculine language, masculine way of thinking, masculine science over art, masculine godlessness over divinity. Those certain structures and ways of being that are emotionless, that are non-holistic, that are separating. This is all masculine perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
And what is saddest part is that we women have internalized that hatred, internalized that lessening. And so we're crossing our legs and we're double checking our speech, and we are overthinking our presence and our power. And we are even hiding our power because we feel like, well, that's survival.
Mm-hmm.
And even if our mothers didn't speak to us about it, they transmitted that terror and that survival skills through the DNA.
Yeah.
And so we are shrunk within ourselves. And to write this book, I also watched the interviews of various female CEOs from around the world and all of them. And they invariably talk about the shrinking and how they are still not taken seriously. And even I, as a spiritual teacher from a great gender neutral tradition, is occasionally questioned for being a woman and doing what I do. I'm sure you faced it. We've all faced it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I also wanted to connect this goddess empowerment, not just at an individual level, but at a collective level, to look at one asura or monster called patriarchy and its illegitimate children in the form of those beliefs, self-limiting beliefs that we have internalized. And it doesn't come up in me or you, maybe as modern women. It doesn't come up as, oh, you're a woman, you better not speak up. But it may come up as a desire to be a little more harmonious. It may come up even as a spiritually wrapped up as more spiritual, more harmonious, more collaborative, more forgiving, and like,
Yeah.
Is that the truth? Or is that just another veneer of being, of somehow telling our attackers that we are harmless? We are, we are here for them. And so I called it like a virus, and it attacks you, and it attacked me. I grew up in a progressive family. I'm part of a lineage of Vedic teachers. I'm the first female teacher. But when I first got married, I was a young 20-something. It got to me because I heard those patriarchal voices. I met those patriarchal expectations, and boom. It's not like my parents told me to act submissively, but I became submissive. I didn't know I'm being submissive, but I was submissive because I had submitted within me to some other voices that were not mine. And then I had to make a journey of seeing through how I had fallen hook, line, and sinker for the greater culture. And that how, even if you are raised differently by your family, you're lucky to have those parents who see you as a goddess from day one. Still walking around on this planet without this knowledge by your side, you can fall a victim to those beliefs and internalize ways in which you sabotage yourself. And that's why I wrote this book, as a reminder to myself. And if I were born again on this planet, I'd like to have this book handy pretty early on.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I think we need those reminders constantly, because the hard wiring over the centuries of the suppressing the feminine runs deep. And I know in my own life, there's been times where I've definitely dimmed my light in order just to kind of fit in, or like you said, just to be harmonious. And then suddenly something will happen and I'll come out of my fog. But I think, we just need these constant reminders, and not only constant reminders, but we need to constantly be working on really making sure that we're not betraying ourselves and that we are true to ourselves.
Yeah. Because you ask any man, and one of their goals in life will not be, I want to be harmonious. So if you look at this word harmony, even like, if the dharmic judicious explanation is that there are times when harmony is warranted and there are times when it's not. When did we women get juxtaposed with this goal, harmony? Or peace, or peacemakers, or even nurturing. We emotionally nurture the wrong people all the time. Why? And I think this is emerging from patriarchy, where we were told, you keep the home, you keep the peace, you bring about harmony, while we go about doing the things adults or people who matter do.
Yeah, it's like loyalty at all costs.
Yeah. So part of my roaring has been that I've become an unpredictable woman, and I'm very proud of it. Nobody can take my harmony or sweetness or peace for granted. It has to be earned.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. And that's the way we should all have that self-respect for ourselves.
I just refuse to wear any clothes. And that's why one of the goddess archetypes, who's really another version of Durga, is Kali. And she's always shown naked because she is wearing no masks. She's wearing nothing to comfort the world. She roams around naked. And she wears a mala, a garland of skulls. And each of that skull represents like how she is eating away her own egoic versions of personality. So she's not a fierce goddess. She is a real goddess. She's an authentic goddess. And I want to emulate her in terms of being naked in my beingness, so that I can then wear the clothes that I want to wear.
Mm-hmm.
I might wear nice clothes occasionally and not nice occasionally. And this is the invitation in my book too.
I love that line you use, not doing nothing to comfort the world. Don't feel like we always have to pacify and we always have to fit in, that you can be your true, authentic self.
We don't owe anyone anything.
Very true. And I love at the end of each of the chapters and each of the goddesses that you gave us contemplations.
Yeah. For example, in the first chapter itself, a contemplation goes like this, like I ask. So these are all I statements, and it says, where am I holding back, stuck, or afraid? And if we ask ourselves that question and take some mindful moments to write it down, then it's going to help. It's going to awaken some Durga-like power to face our own inner darkness, inner monsters, inner challenges, or inner belief systems. And when I asked myself, where am I holding back? I was really holding back my own power. I was holding back my own intellectual capacities. And then, so you may have your own, Colette. My readers will have their own. I was afraid because I'm not a very domesticated woman, and and nobody says a woman must be domesticated. Those were roles that we confirmed on her. I like to cook. I love my child, but I can't sit and obsess on the china in my house. And I personally don't like department stores. And I'm so glad there is online shopping now. I don't have to leave the comfort of my beautiful home because I read and write more. And I was afraid for a while there in my 20s that the world would know it. But now I speak about it on the world stage. The world better know it.
Yeah.
So it's like, where are you holding yourself back? Where are you stuck? Where are you afraid? It's good to put it on paper, because then you can, once you've objectified it, it no longer terrorizes you. And you can then ask for your Durga to come in. And one of the skills that I've taught in my book is Durga moves around the world on a roaring lion. And I often imagine myself sitting on a lion and facing something, or showing up in the world sitting on my lion. It really gives me strength. The next contemplation is I recognize, and it's like, I am Durga, Shakti, power itself. So if power lives within me, and if I'm Durga, even if a drop of Durga is dwelling within me as my soul, then I have it. And so then on, the contemplation goes on to I connect. While I look into the mirror, I see the fire of courage in my eyes, and I would sit in front of the mirror and I'd imagine Durga within me, and slowly I saw that resolve showing up in my eye. And anybody can try that, especially after they've read each chapter and felt like they've been initiated into the goddess path. And then there's a contemplation of I decide, I arm myself with weapons, because Durga has shown that she has 10 hands and she's carrying weapons in each one of them, which represents that I'm ready to go to war. And so our weapons can be an informed intellect, an informed community of goddess women, an informed integrity and persistence. These can be our weapons. So even like you said, sometimes you and I and all women start sleepwalking, and and then you have to wake up from that fog. So that's persistence. Keep coming back to roar. When you find you catch yourself meowing from time to time.
Yeah.
And then it's I act. And that's a statement called I get on my lion and do what needs doing, say what needs saying. And gosh, I have acted many times sitting on my lion. I have roared. Whether it's a discussion on parenting with my partner or whatever that is. And finally, the last contemplation, and I'm just reading from one chapter, is I remember There is nothing to fear in righteous action. Durga laughs as she roars with confidence and ease. Take it easy. You're not morphing into this overly strong person. You know, there's humor here too. There is lightness and ease. This is dharma. The whole world will shower flowers on you because you said what you had to say. And so these contemplations can really bring it home and help make the goddess personal to each reader and help these goddess become like wisdom angels for them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I really found that when I was reading through the book that it was so inspirational reading the stories and very empowering. And then when it came to the contemplations at the end of each section, that it was self-reflection and shining a light on those areas within yourself and really taking time to contemplate, where am I dimming my light and where can I be more powerful and how can I step into this power within me, this divine consciousness within me, and bring this into the world.
So true, Colette. Bring it into the world. I'm with you.
Yeah, because the world needs all of us to bring our true divine spirit into the world, and this is what we need to do in order to move forward. I think the world is going through this fractured story right now, and we're all feeling very uncomfortable in the world for a reason. And so this is where we all need to step up and bring our gifts into the world so that we can be part of moving forward.
And these goddess archetypes and my teachings of dharma from there can help us move forward a little more, make it a little more tangible. What was interesting for me, Colette, was that I went back to this mythology, and a mythology is a memory that's held by a people. And this mythology that I have shared in my book has been around in India for 10,000 years. We are an ancient culture. But often those details were lost. Like Lakshmi was shown to be this happily married goddess to divine masculine god Vishnu. And she's always depicted in domestic bliss, but her other story of finding this and roaring and saying she wants to be valued was not emphasized upon. And I guess what I did in the book was reinterpret and represent that same old mythology so that women and other gendered folks and even men who want to learn how to be more supportive to their women and other gendered beings on this planet can benefit from these stories. And in writing this book, as I explored other cultures, I found that goddess archetypes have existed forever.
Yeah.
And it's time for us women to bring them out and dust them and really hold them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so encouraging. In your book, it's really, I love this Vedic wisdom. And I think that's a great wisdom to share with children as well. If you have children, to share this wisdom with them, because these stories are so empowering.
And I'm happy to tell you that we are considering releasing a special children's book edition of my book, especially for girls from grade 4 to grade 8 onwards.
Fantastic.
This is a great time for young girls worldwide to benefit from it. And it is a belief that it's time to bring this knowledge out as early as possible, so that the DNA reprogramming can happen sooner than later.
Yeah, it's always amazing, just like with the ancient science of Ayurveda, that we need to lean on this ancient wisdom now in order to move forward into a new way of being in the world.
Yes, indeed. I agree.
Yeah. Before we finish up here, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before I ask you about where people can find the book and so on?
I think I'd just like to share that from my heart, I want this message to go far and wide. And there is a 9-day festival in the Indian tradition where we celebrate the divine feminine, and it's known as Navratri, the festival of 9 nights. And I was celebrating that festival, meditating in front of my goddess altar, decorating her, lighting candles and ghee lamps. And then it was on the 6th night when I was working on a book on Ayurveda psychology, because I'm also an Ayurveda healer and scholar and an author. And I was working on a book and seriously working on it. And suddenly I felt like I couldn't work on it. So I started a new file and I started writing Roar Like a Goddess. And I've completed my 2 former books. One book took a whole year and a half. The other took 3 years. These are books on Vedic spirituality and psychology, and one on Ayurveda. But I completed Roar Like a Goddess in 4 months.
Oh my goodness.
I couldn't stop. I felt like I was channeling the divine feminine.
Wow.
And then when I sent it to the publishers, they dropped everything to make it happen.
Oh my goodness.
And so much is coming forward in terms of support for this book.
Fantastic.
I really feel that the goddess dimension wants the goddess women to have this book. And I just wanted to share it with you and all our listeners that we're not alone. And that when we walk like a goddess, talk like a goddess, think like a goddess, and then pray to the goddess. She can be of any culture, but pray to the divine feminine, connect with her. Then as her daughters, we shall get all kinds of help and messages. So thank you so much for having me. And I wanted to share that piece of divine intervention, because I had no plans on working on a book on goddess archetypes until when I started working on it.
Yeah. And it was so meant to be, and that it just flowed in 4 months. That's amazing. And so it is being published by Sounds True in July 2022, but people can pre-order it, right?
Yes, it's available for pre-order everywhere. And there is one opportunity. There is one chance that the book may get delayed by a few months or a few weeks. It's based on we have a wonderful, well-known illustrator, Eka Bhumi Charles, who is creating original darshan images for this book. But pre-order it. It will be soon in your inbox. It will be there when you need to read it, when the goddess wants you to have it. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And then people can connect with you at acharyashunya.com, awakenself.com, and roarlikeagoddess.com. Is that correct?
Roar Like a Goddess is not up as yet, but definitely awakenself.com and acharyashunya.com will work. Wonderful. I'm available on all social media platforms also, like Instagram and Facebook, by my name, Acharya Shunya. Please find me. Come say hello.
Perfect. And I will put all those links in the show notes. So please go over to the show notes so we can get you over to Acharya Shunya. Acharya Shunya, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you for putting this amazing book out into the world. And I really look forward to hearing the listeners' response to this book. I think it will resonate with so many people.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Take good care of yourself and come back and visit us again soon.
I love visiting your podcast, and your questions are always so deep. They lead us into wonderful conversations. Thank you, Colette.
Great. A pleasure. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Acharya Shunya, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned in this episode. If you think that this episode will be interesting to family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this wonderful wisdom. And if you haven't already subscribed or followed the podcast, please do so. And therefore, the new episodes will automatically download for you. And I would really appreciate it if you would rate or review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, because this helps people to find the podcast. It means we can share more of this wisdom of Ayurveda out into the world. Please check me out on social media also under Elements Healing and Wellbeing on Instagram and Facebook. And if you would like to join the podcast community, that private community, you'll find that link in the show notes also, or just visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, please take care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.